Hello and welcome to 51st Chapters, Session 2. My name is Nikki Trianto.
And I'm Heather Clark.
Okay, welcome back. We're so excited to have you. I'm just as nervous this time as I was last time. Oh, so we're going to be checking the chats earlier today, hopefully, than we did last time. But go ahead and send us notes that you're here. I'm going to take a screenshot of it so that we can make sure to see you. Let's see. Okay, so to clear up, we have some items of business from last time. First of all, great questions. We had a few from last time that we didn't get to go over, especially about Hook. So we're going to go over that a little bit today. And also, I was defining premise. Oh, shoot. Look at my awesome belt. See it? See it? I told you I was going to show.
It's a good belt.
But look, it's making all this noise against my chair. So I'm going to take it off. Every time I move, there's this metal jangle, and I don't like that. Okay, so last week I said that you have to get to your quote, and I quote myself, entire premise in the first chapter, but I was defining premise a lot too narrowly, and that works for my genre because I happen to write a mystery, and so a lot of times the mystery, you know, there's like a murder or something in the first chapter, and you know the premise pretty easily, but I was using that. What I really meant to say was inciting incident. So you want to be able to get to the inciting incident in the first chapter, and that's the moment we talked about the Titanic setup, you know, where there's the Titanic, and then there's the iceberg and the Titanic, and we know that they're on a collision course, even if they're not colliding yet. So inciting incident is what we're going to call that now, and you do want that in your opening, and again, your opening does not have to be chapter 1, although for a first chapter contest, and I won't hit this any harder than I already have. Hopefully it's in the first chapter if you're doing a contest. If you're not doing a contest, especially if you write like middle grade and your chapters are really short, your inciting incident needs to be in the opening, and the opening, in my opinion, is defined as however long it takes you to get to the inciting incident. But don't make it 60 pages. Because, and there are good reasons for this, if your reader is reading along, they're looking for the primary attention of the story. And if you're not getting to that until page 60, they're going to be like, the story was going along, and then it just took this major left turn for no reason, and it's not really going to work very well.
And if your reader is me, they're going to decide they can't trust you as an author by about chapter 2. If they haven't seen that, they're going to be like, oh, this person doesn't understand conflict, we're done.
Some stories are really, really long, you know, like 1,000 pages, but even then, they're getting to that inciting incident. They're just spending more time figuring out the theme and having exciting.
Like if you're Dostoevsky, then you can do that.
Actually, that's true. That's true. What's my favorite book?
Brothers Karamazov.
The Brothers Karamazov.
I read like 200 pages. I'm still not quite
sure. No.
You
only read 100 because
no,
if you had
read 200, like 500 pages.
If you had read 200, you would have read to the end. Just skip the first 100 pages. That's how.
No,
really
okay.
And then the inciting incident is on page 115, and it's so awesome. Okay. So the inciting incident is what we're talking about. Also, I had a question, I think it was from Monique, and then maybe, oh, I forget who, I should have written it down. But anyway, they were asking if we finished, remember when we played our little game about hooks?
Yes.
And we never finished that. Remember I asked you about Katniss, and I said she's looking at two characters, and she almost killed her sister's cat.
Yes.
What do you think that was advertising? I never actually pinned you down on that.
Oh, that is a good question.
So what hook was she starting with? Because she has a lot of action in that book, and she could have started with like them killing a deer, running from peacekeeping people.
Right.
I mean, it could have been.
It's about how she needs to protect her family.
Right. So
it's about how she needs to protect Prim.
Right.
Specifically so that we understand what's going to happen when she volunteers.
Right. So we're starting with her, we're going to define all these terms, but we're basically starting with her motivation. She is motivated by the need she has to protect her sister.
Right. And we've been shown the lack there because we've been shown the mom who did not protect them, could not protect them, and why Katniss had to do it.
Right. I mean, we see that a little later, but I mean, page 1, we
already see the need to protect them.
We see the need. True. And also, on page 1, we see the world. Their world sucks, right?
Yes.
We know immediately.
We're not a world that sucks, it's the best.
We're not talking like, you know, that she lives in a dystopia because, you know, she's not allowed to pick what color she wears in the morning. It's like she's going to kill a cat. She's going to drown it. And that's what she wakes up thinking about. Do you know what I mean? And it's just a normal thing for her to think about, whether or not she kills animals to survive. Okay, So also, I didn't really talk about Hook all that much, but I did because we had some questions about it. So I just thought, in order to make an opening catchy, now that you've decided, I'm going to start with narration, I'm going to start with voice, I'm going to start with action, I'm going to start with whatever that advertises my, shoot, I need to be making sure that I'm looking at this.
The chats. They're probably chatting all sorts of horrible things to us.
Oh my gosh, what if it's not? Every time. Here, talk about scene and sequel.
Sure. Are we actually live?
I don't know. Talk and then it says it's going. Every time we say that.
Awesome. We're super inept at this, but we really like it. So it's fun. With the scene and sequel thing, I just wanted to talk about, I was critiquing a first chapter recently, and I was confused because I just thought, I'm not quite sure where it's going and what's happening here. And so what I did was I thought about scene and sequel. And if you haven't hit on scene and sequel yet, there are several good books and or blog posts that you can read to learn about that. And I will definitely be posting on yoheather.com. We'll make sure and go post to my favorite blog post that summarizes scene and structure by Bickham. I believe it is. Bingham. One of those people. Anyway, so with scene and sequel,
sorry, you guys.
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
Continue. Okay.
Yes, continue.
So with scene and sequel, the thing that is really critical is that there's basically two kinds of scenes. There's a scene that is structured goal, conflict, disaster, and then there's a scene that follows that is structured reaction, dilemma, decision. And I think, I've heard people say different things, but I really think your first chapter needs to be one or the other. And it doesn't matter which, really. My opening scene for my book that is just about to go on submission is a reaction, dilemma, decision scene. But you can open with, I either need to know what your character wants in that scene, then I need to see some conflict, that what is going to come in the way of her getting what she wants or him getting what he wants, and then I need to see the disaster at the end. Now, by disaster, this is the first chapter, so I don't need you to blow things up. I don't need massive apocalyptic things. But when I say disaster, I mean something needs to materially get in the way at the end and or hint that we are about to see the change. Whereas in my opening scene, I have a reaction, dilemma, decision scene. And my opening scene is a girl in a car. We talked last week about it, my pregnancy story. She's in the car with her mother on the way to the abortion clinic. So she is reacting to the big disaster, which was telling her mom that she's pregnant and her mom rushing her off to the abortion clinic. So she's reacting to that. The dilemma becomes, she sees that baby in the ultrasound and she identifies with the baby, and she also feels like she's not alone for the first time ever. And then she makes a decision. The very last line of this chapter is, can anyone force you to have an abortion? And this is the moment when she knows that she's making a different choice. So I don't even get to the point where we clearly know she's made the choice, but some of the things with scene and sequel that have been really helpful to me is knowing that once you hit that end part, if it's goal, conflict, disaster, the moment we know that your character has not accomplished their goal or can't accomplish their goal, or the moment we see them triumph, but then we know that that's a bad thing, that's the moment you get out. That's the moment you're done the scene. And that's a perfect moment and a perfect way to get your end of chapter hook, to get that end of chapter feeling that's going to just grab your reader and make them turn that page. And Nikki and I used to fight, actually, not fight, but argue, we kind of would fight about chapter hooks, and she would say to me, Heather, you have no chapter hooks at the end of your chapters. And I'm like, that's because I want to finish it. So I would get to the end and I'd have the little disaster moment, and then we would think about it and we'd feel warm and fuzzy. And then you never have to turn and read my next chapter ever. So basically, it took me forever until I hit upon scene and sequel. I couldn't do those. I just never figured out how to do the reveals. But until I got to the point where I know if it's a goal, conflict, disaster scene, when I get to that disaster, either the triumph that's really a disaster that we as the reader know is not a good thing, or the actual disaster, that's the moment when we know they have not accomplished their goal, or they have and it's a bad thing, we're out of the scene. And we're out of the chapter. And then if it's a reaction, dilemma, decision scene, we have this moment of decision, and then we're going to want to turn the page to find out how they act on that decision. And we better get that pretty quickly within the pages that follow.
Right, so, unless you're going to another viewpoint character.
Exactly.
Which is fine. You know, you can leave us hanging.
Right, but then when you come back to this viewpoint character,
you need to have it right
that up.
That's why sometimes when you're reading multiple viewpoints, you actually skip a viewpoint. Do you ever do that?
Yes, totally. Because I'm dying. I have to know.
Right. That's how you should be writing. Awesome. Okay. So we've gone over scene and sequel. I want to go over some vocabulary terms here. We talk a lot about the same things and we use different words to say it.
Right.
But I want to talk about motivation, inner conflict, and emotional needs. Those are essentially the same thing. It's just different ways to think about it, okay? So a motivation is what compels your character to act. And I mostly focused on Hunger Games when I thought of examples just because I figured everyone had seen it. But, and we've gone over this. Katniss is determined to be there for her sister the way her own mother wasn't there for her after her dad died. Okay, so that is her motivation. Inner conflict. So the motivation is what she is trying to solve her emotional need is the way to think of it if you like to use the word emotional need. But her emotional need is to protect her sister. Right. So her motivation is to be there for her. And then her inner conflict is the struggle between what compels you or your character to act and how your character feels about acting that way. So let's go to Katniss again. Katniss is determined to be there for Prim, show her humanity by being there and being a good sister to Prim. And that's great, but the way to get to protecting Prim as soon as the name is called is to join the Hunger Games and come back to Prim, which involves killing other people, which is betraying humanity.
Right.
So, and again, there's an irony there, and we talked about how that's inherent to a story, but it's also an internal conflict. It's not, it's just her own feelings. If she had no qualms about killing people, or if she didn't define killing people, other people, as not part of humanity, or does that make sense? Like, there are some people, you know, especially people who grew up, you know, thousands of years ago. I mean, they just really didn't have a big problem killing anyone outside their clan. Like, sticking up for their clan guy, awesome. Killing the other guy, double awesome. And there wasn't really a lot of conflict there, okay? But, of course, in our day and age, we are trained to, you know, be more conflicted about that. Okay, so, and I just want to point out that characters can be super aware of their struggle, like of their internal struggle, or really super clueless. So again, sticking with Hunger Games, Peeta is very aware of his struggle. He very much is like, oh, how do I be myself, but still be in their games, but still survive? But, you know, he's really like worked up about it. And then there's Cato, who doesn't realize at all that there's any conflict. I don't know if you remember him. He's the really strong guy from like District 1 who volunteers, and he's really ruthless. And it's not until he gets to a crisis moment where that's where he's just about to die, where he realizes there's all this conflict. He has all this conflict inside of him, and they're making him kill, and what was it all for? And, you know, that's all I'm good for. Do you remember he says that? You know what I mean? And so your character can have anywhere along that spectrum. They can have full awareness or no awareness at all. And anyway, so just pay attention to that. And they need to be consistent. Katniss is sort of more of a middle of the road. So she kind of is aware sometimes, and then she sort of slips into acting just based on instinct and not really thinking about the implications of what she's doing. And in fact, you'll see that she's a lot happier when she acts based on instinct. Even though someone's running after her with a knife, she is at peace. It's ironic. Right. It's when she has time to think that she is conflicted. Right. So anyway, okay. So now we're going to have you talk about stated goal. Did you already talk about stated goals?
I didn't yet.
Okay,
no.
Go ahead.
So I talked about how we have the inner conflict. So we're talking about emotional needs, basically. And then our stated goal, or our concrete desire, or whatever it is. I'm going to add, I didn't add the word concrete desire on your handout, but I'm going to. But so inner conflict, motivation, emotional need, that's all one body of things. And then going on to the next body of things, that would be like purpose, outer conflict, stated goal, or concrete desire. Right. So so with my pregnancy book, for example, she needs love and family, and that's her inner goal, or her inner desire. But then her stated goal is to keep her baby. As soon as she meets that baby on the ultrasound, sees that baby on the ultrasound, she decides, I'm keeping this baby. I'm going to make the family that I need. Right. So that's her stated goal. And the really critical thing here is when you choose your inner goal, your emotional desire and your concrete desire, or however you're going to define them. Once you choose those two things have to carry with you all the way through the story, right to the climax. Right. So pick something you can spend a whole book talking about. Well, and I am going to say this too. Your concrete goal doesn't change. Some people's concrete goal too, but their motivation never does. Right. You cannot swap that up. And we'll talk about that with Home Alone. Home Alone has 3 separate purposes or concrete goals. That's true. And that can happen. But also part of it is isn't his main goal to protect his house and keep safe, right?
Right, but he doesn't have that in the inciting incident.
We don't often have it yet.
Right.
But the moment that we really
his motivation is the same from the time he says, the inciting incident for that one, we'll just talk about it, is when he says, I wish my family would disappear. I wish I would wake up tomorrow and they weren't even here. And his mom says, right. Do you really? And they, of course, they spend a lot of time on it.
Right.
Okay. And we're going to talk about that. How you
hang a lantern on it.
Yeah, we're going to pause the whole world in our first chapter so that we can really highlight this. And then we're going to start the world again up. But we want to pause and really highlight. So she says, I hope you don't really mean that. And he says, I do. I hope my family gone. And then he wakes up the next morning and he's like, my family disappeared.
Right. So first he's super happy.
He's totally happy. His motivation never changes. And we'll talk about what his motivation is, but his concrete goal changes.
That's true. That's true. And also, so following up with that concrete goal, the next thing, there are two kind of other things. The controlling belief. Do we want to talk about that here?
To explain that.
So your controlling belief is what your character believes they have to do to meet their emotional needs.
Right.
So, and it's very closely related with the concrete goal. Like Tessa believes that if she's not going to be alone forever in my book, that she believes that she has to build her own family.
Right.
She has to keep this baby or she will be alone forever.
Right.
And
so her controlling belief is that the only way to have family, which is her motivation,
is to create her own.
Is to create her own.
Right. On her own terms.
Right.
And then her announced strategy. Now that is what really shifts a lot. And so then their announced strategy is kind of
let's not do because announced strategy might not even happen in the first chapter.
True. So let's not go there.
So we'll get there, but we're not going to get there yet.
Okay.
Okay. I wanted to go back onto controlling belief, and we're going to talk about while we're talking about Home Alone anyway. I'm just going to talk about Home Alone. Okay. And I think this is even in your notes. So first, Kevin wants his family to disappear, and that's the inciting incident. That's his Titanic wish. And of course, we can see that it's, again, like thinking of it, the Titanic, the ice, the Titanic, the ice. We're looking at Kevin who wants his entire family to disappear. And then we're looking over here at reality and we're like, well, of course his family is not going to disappear. But that's why it's a comedy. Because the whole family does disappear. You know what I mean? That's what's so funny, about it. And that's what makes it.
So our incident is them forgetting him.
Right. So then they forget him. And then we look back at here and then we can see him. There's no iceberg. He's got what he's wanted. But he realizes that it doesn't solve his emotional needs.
Right.
Even though he got what he wanted. And so his motivation or his inner conflict or whatever, he just wants more control over his life. That's really all he wants. And a lot of middle school movies are about control.
Right.
Controlling your own life, your own destiny. So he wants control, and that's why he wishes his family away. Then he sees that someone's going to maybe break into his house. And so that is so when his family disappears, that's about the first quarter mark. That gets us to the premise. That's the entire premise, is about the first quarter. Then the halfway mark of the movie, that would be like the midpoint. He realizes that there's two police officer wannabes are going to, attack the home. And then by about the 3/4 mark, we have him state to Santa Claus, you remember that? He says, I just want my family back. Or right. I just want my family to, whatever it is. And then he gets the Pez or something. Whatever. Don't worry about it.
It's been a while.
Anyway, so he has 3 different goals: to have his family go away, to protect his home, and then to have his family return. And all of that is to try to get control over his life. And then, and I'm going to read this right here. Kevin did not get his original purpose. That's his stated goal. His original stated goal he did not get. So in that sense, it was a failure. But he fulfilled his emotional need, which
right.
and he fulfilled his emotional need by finding a higher purpose. And you hear people say that she found a higher purpose.
Right.
And what that goes to is, his first purpose was to get rid of his family, was maybe not the best way to fulfill his emotional need. And in fact, when he got it, anyway. But you'll hear people say that a lot, like, you're trying to find something, trying to do something, but you need to find a higher purpose to fulfill this need.
What's interesting is Nikki is talking about like kind of far down in the story.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking about like all the way. And the reason for that is you can't have a killer first chapter if you don't know some of these things, because you are making a contract with your reader. You're promising huge things in the first chapter and you need to promise them. Right.
So talk about that. Why don't you talk about, so in the first chapter, you're going to want to have your outer conflict at least somewhat, okay, and this is the order. Sorry, let me just go in order. I should just never go outside my notes. Okay, you set up your story like this. You want to start with an inner conflict. You don't necessarily have to state it, but they need to have it.
Show it, even if it's just by its lack.
Yep. Then you move on to, because they have an inner conflict, they then have an outer conflict. And it always goes in that order.
And sometimes we are only going to barely hint at the outer conflict by the end of that first chapter. And sometimes in a regular book, you're not even going to hit that outer conflict till the next chapter. But in a contest, we really need to see at least the hint.
Right.
We need to find out how that's going to connect.
And then the outer conflict is what carries the entire story for like the next 25 chapters or 35 or however long it is, okay? And while that story is carried, you're going to analyze the inner conflict by having subplots that hearken unto it. And we'll talk about some of the subplots in various stories. And then at the very end, in the climax, you want the inner conflict to be resolved at the moment of greatest tension, and then they can solve the outer conflict. So it goes inner conflict introduced, outer conflict introduced, a long story. Inner conflict resolved, outer conflict resolved, end of story. And that's kind of how, and in the interim, you're fighting the outer conflict and analyzing the inner conflict.
Because we have to have the moment of internal change that finally changes who our character is, that can let us see, yes, this person can do what they need to do. Then we have to demonstrate it. So those two must happen. And a lot of times what happens is we don't demonstrate the change. We just have them have the interchange, and then we're done. We have to actually
And when you're talking about a story, this is what makes first chapter so much cooler. They never have a chapter 15 contest, ever. Because there's so much of the story at the very beginning and at the very end. And when people talk about stories, they tend to talk mostly about the very end. But it's all set up in the very beginning. I mean, if they like the story, it's because those two mirrored each other in a satisfying way. Okay, so announced strategy. Why don't you tell us what that is? You will want to get to that, and it's good to know what it is.
You know, really, you don't have to get there right in the first couple chapters. You don't. But when you want to get to your announced strategy, that is when your character basically says to the reader and in the story,
even to themselves,
this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to fix my problem. So, I mean, initially, like in my book, Tessa decides to, well, okay, let's go to Katniss. Let's go to Hunger Games. What is Katniss's announced strategy? Katniss's announced strategy is I'm volunteering.
Well, not only that, but she's going to win.
And then, that's true. She says she's going to volunteer. That's probably her first thing. But then she gets in there, and when she decides how she's going to interact before, like when they're doing the training, and she decides what to show and how to.
And announced strategy, it depends on how you look at it, but announced strategy can meander as it goes. Like the announced strategy, am I
going to have allies?
It really should be per scene. And I call it scene goal. Have you established a scene goal?
That's true, but it's really nice if somewhere very early they propose a basic announced strategy, and they basically say, this is what I'm going to do. And the person says, what? They cannot do that. I'm going to follow them a whole novel and see if they can really do it.
And my genre is really easy because it's mystery, the one that I happen to write. And so her stated goal is to solve the mystery. We don't really have to go into it. It's pretty obvious. It's so obvious that you almost don't even have to tell the reader. But sometimes if their stated goal is to like join a band and do this battle of the bands and beat their nemesis who stole their girlfriend and blah, 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 like, then you have to explain.
Then how are they actually going to do it?
Yeah, well then
what are they actually going to do?
What is their plan? What do they really see going on there, and how are they going to do that? And if that way the reader has some sense of what to look for, and when things don't go the way that the character thinks they're going to go, then the reader senses the conflict. Otherwise, events might happen and the reader might think, oh, well, that was interesting. But you want the reader to think, that was catastrophic. So they need to know where the main character wanted to go. Okay, so Inciting Incident, we talked about premise, we talked about story arc. I'm just going to mention really quick is the entire story, looking at it from the beginning to the end. How does it change? A lot of stories end with success. Some stories are tragedies, though. And so why don't you talk about
my favorite kind of story? No, my favorite kind of story, really. I mean, I honestly don't know if I'm capable of writing a story where we just get to the end and they get their concrete goal and they get their
Even though that's a very common thing.
It's very common. I don't know that I'm capable.
Mine was like that.
Usually, for me, mine winds up being wistful, and it winds up being somewhere in between.
So they get one, but not the other.
Right. So they're going to wind up getting. I pretty much have to meet their internal motivation goal. I have to, because I'm not gonna give them what they want, and that would be a tragedy.
That would be a tragedy.
If I gave them what they wanted, their actual concrete goal, but then it's just never gonna meet their needs, that's a tragedy for you. Or if they don't get either, which is just hideous.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
They can just not get either. But
well, yeah, that's true. That's a tragedy. But I suppose getting your stated goal, but still not getting your emotional need met, would be its own version of a tragedy.
It would be beautiful. I want to write that. I know. I just got really excited.
Oh, I love it. I'm gonna write about somebody who has only one eye. I don't know why. Wouldn't you want to read a mystery about a guy who only had one eye?
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking.
I want to know where the eye is. Just kidding.
That's a great question. Okay,
so basically you have to just decide how to do that. But I personally find it most satisfying usually to find that they either don't get their concrete goal or here's the thing, that they get their emotional goal.
Because it's surprising, that's
because
why.
Their concrete goal changes right at the end. And that's really for me, like they want this one thing, and at the end
they decide
they have changed
because
and resolve first their internal conflict. They find a higher purpose, and that's really to me the most satisfying.
And then once they find the higher purpose, they can solve their emotional need. I mean, there are so many ways to solve emotional needs, but the problem with humanity is that sometimes we get fixated about solving our emotional need a certain way.
Right. And what we really need, and this is why the first chapter is so critical, and why it's so critical to have the first chapter set those two needs up if possible, because that's what we're going to follow. You're telling me right there in the front, follow me. I'm going to take you here. And maybe I'm watching a broken character set up a terrible goal, and I want to know how they're going to possibly change or grow through that.
Right. Okay. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think it's probably already on here, but again, just to reiterate and go over my notes so that you understand them. If the inner and outer conflict are both solved, that is your most simple form of story, and you do not have to go into the theme a lot. Think of Maze Runner. What's the theme? He wants to find out who he is. Why? Because he doesn't know who he is. See what I'm saying? We're not digging deep here because it's an action adventure story.
Right.
And that's what it should be.
And he tries to find out who he is.
And
he gets to the maze and find out.
So he gets his concrete goal and he gets his emotional need met. He now understands why they're there.
And it's super dangerous and fun while we're finding out.
Right. And that's the way it should be. And you'll notice you can't say, oh, well, it's an action story, so it doesn't need to be.
So he doesn't need an arc.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
That's one books that I can't write. That's why I can't write them. And I bet if you would look at some of the stories that are like flipping around in your head, that you're like, that's so cool. Maybe it's super funny. Maybe you had an interesting premise, but did you have an arc?
Right.
You've got to find that. You've got to find that emotional and concrete need.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So don't overthink it if you're doing like a James Bond action-y kind of thing. If only one is solved, and I guess I just assumed that the concrete goal wouldn't come to fruition. Imagine you had a story about somebody who all they ever wanted to do was be a rock star, and then by the end they realize they don't have to be a rock star in order to have their emotional need met.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be the kind of thing where it would be like kind of bittersweet. They don't get everything that they wanted. They learn to make peace with who they are. And
you know, it's interesting.
Whatever.
I was just thinking about Hunger Games, and through the whole thing, you're so torn because you know that by the rules of the world that have been set up, it is impossible for her to meet her concrete goal of getting back and getting Peeta back too. She can't do it. Well, that becomes a huge concrete goal for her.
Right.
But she also has the concrete goal of protecting her family.
Right.
But we know once we're in the arena, she does not want to kill him. We know this. We know this. I'm sorry, but I'm just as smart as you. No, I'm just kidding. And so then all of a sudden you get to the end, and what's interesting is she does. They change the rules. She gets to save Peeta. She gets to go out triumphant without killing her friend.
Right.
She gets out, but she doesn't get to protect her family.
Right.
So her number one emotional motivation need, she is told essentially by that world, guess what? You've just endangered everything you love.
Right.
And then that is a draw for the next book.
For the next book. Okay, I'm just going to quickly mention character arc is how the character, whether the character's journey is a tragedy or these are very simple. But basically, the character, do they start happy and end happy? Do they start sad and end happy? Do they start happy and end sad? Just kind of what's their, so when we say character arc, that's all we're talking about. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And then going right into theme. Theme is the meaning behind the story. Okay. I'm going to skip that. But go to the second point.
Should we check actually? Just occurred to me, we never looked at the chat.
But let me, again, actually, I'm going to go in the opposite order for the theme. All the way at the bottom, whatever, I just wanted to say this because we were talking about with Hunger Games.
Right.
You get to the end, and this is what basically Katniss thinks to herself. I finally realized that my pursuit of humanity is impossible under the rules of the capital. The odds are not only not in my favor, they are zero. I therefore shall never bring children into this world. It's not really very peppy.
That's true.
And then in the second book, in the third book, we basically are set up for, I have to tear down the entire system in order to ever have the odds be in my favor.
Right.
And that's what the whole book's about. And you'll notice that that theme is stated right in the first chapter. And they're kind of joking about it. They're like, may the odds be in your favor. And they say it with this funny accent, and they talk about it, and everybody impersonates it and whatever. But that is the theme. It's stated as a hypothesis statement. May the odds be in your favor, which is saying that this world gives you some odds.
There's some irony for you.
I know. So they're saying that the world is saying to you, just play the game, and may the odds be in your favor, you'll be fine. But Katniss proves the odds aren't in your favor. In fact, you have zero.
We have to change the game.
We have to change the game.
She changes the game at the end of the first book entirely and flips it on them, which is what makes them so angry.
Which is
what makes her immediately a rebel.
Her story arc is opposite the story's story arc. So the character arc and the story arc are completely opposite. And so we'll talk about why that's the case. It's just kind of fun. They don't have to be the same. They certainly can be. It's just kind of interesting. But we're going to go ahead and, did you want to talk about promise to the reader? Did we already make? Talk specifically about story,
let me do
question.
That. Okay, well, I want you to actually talk about that, but I am just going to mention really quickly. In your first chapter, you are making a promise to your reader, and what you are promising is a whole bunch of things. First, you're telling me you're going to follow this person on their journey, and this is what they want, and this is the conflict. These two things right here, this is going to be the central core of my story, and I'm going to follow it through, and it either will or will not be met, and that's the promise. The second thing that you're promising that I think is really critical, you are promising what genre the book is. So I was critiquing a book recently, and I read it, and I knew what genre the book was because the person is my friend, but I didn't have the promise there on the page in the first chapter. And so talking to her about it, I definitely had to say, you know, tell me right now, is this a romance? Is this a thriller? Is this a, I have to know. And like what Nikki was saying, if these girls are going to be witches, there had better be some witchcraft in chapter 1. Witchcraft. And, or, you know, and even if you don't want to put it on page 1, frankly, I think I want to know genre on page 1. But if you're going to hide that a little bit, you better still be giving me subtle hints so that when I suddenly see it.
Wait, did you say page 1 or chapter 1?
Page 1.
Okay, yeah, you better
I want to know genre on page 1. I really do. I want to know if there's going to be fantastical elements.
At least by diction, at least by pacing,
voice,
at least by voice, at least by character thoughts. Like, are they delving deep into their thoughts? Is it like, ooh, this is really going to be deep?
Yes.
We need to know that.
Exactly. Are we going to have deep mental penetration in all of these things? If we're not going to have that, then you don't have to give it to me, but give it to me on page 1.
But Brothers Karamazov took it a little far, going 100 pages on deep thoughts.
A little far, and I'm a little bit of a wimp.
A little far. Did you say what you wanted to on that?
I think so. So now talk about.
Well, there was a quick question about, is an announced strategy a hook? Absolutely not. No. A hook is broadly defined. It's just whatever makes people keep reading. And so you can think of a hook as your first line, your first page, your first whole chapter. I mean, it's really vague about.
It's really vague, and lots of different people will describe hook in different ways.
Right, and so in the first chapter contest, I remember that is one of the questions. Like, that's the first thing they rate you on is the hook.
Your hook.
And some people commented on my first line specifically, and some people commented more on like the opening, whatever, like a couple pages. You know what I mean? And so an announced strategy comes way later than that, unless some books start with an announced strategy. I guess I'm trying to think of one.
I think you're going to typically get to it by chapter 2 or 3.
Right. An announced strategy is like, okay, if I'm going to solve this mystery, then I'm going to have to team up with my cousin who I haven't spoken to in 50 years and blah, blah, blah.
So the strategy is go get that cousin.
I had an affair with his wife and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So then that's the announced strategy. And you might get to that in chapter 1. You might, but, you know, okay. So, yeah, that's definitely not a hook, though.
No.
Because you're not going to start with that. Because the announced strategy is something that they wouldn't do right away in page 1. They wouldn't be motivated enough to. They have to have some inertia of some problems happening before they resort to like, okay, I'm not just gonna what's the word? I'm not just gonna tackle this problem like half-baked or I have no idea what you're saying, sorry. Half ASS. You know what I mean? Like that expression, how there is no other word for that expression.
Right.
But anyway,
half-baked full work.
I'm not just gonna come at this without thinking of it.
Half-bummed, Nikki.
In this household, definitely. But anyway, not even half-butted.
It's one cheek.
It is one cheek. I really like that. I'm going to use that. So instead, because your initial reaction as a person or as a character to a problem is to just go based on the instinct. Okay, but if you're getting to announced strategy, like you're all in.
Right.
At this point, you're like,
and typically that's not going to really happen until he reach that first quarter when they have crossed into the other world and they're like, I'm going, I have a plan. That's where we're really going to see that.
And I think it can happen before you enter the other world.
It can.
It can happen, but definitely not.
It can be part of your entering of the other worlds.
Yeah, it can be that.
Typically, the actual announced strategy is going to happen as we're transitioning.
Right. Yep. And again, it can evolve. The announced strategy.
And it will for sure. Like my character is like, I'm going to keep this baby. And what does that mean? Like it means going to a women's shelter one night. It means sneaking into someone's basement and camping. I mean, all kinds of things that she has to do as her world changes. Trial cycles are a lot of times part of that.
Right. Okay. Oh, I can't believe I have to admit this, but I'm going to now.
I'm scared.
I haven't even told you this story. You're looking, people, at the kind of person who gets into passionate fights at church with other women about whether nursery children, who, if you are not LDS, are ages 18 months to 3 years old, arguing passionately to tears over whether they should have 3 or 5 directed activities during nursery time.
Meaning that you cried over this?
Meaning that I made somebody cry and walk away. And I tried to fix it. But I never thought I would be that kind of person, and I seriously had like an identity crisis. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wrote her an email. I almost called you, but then I couldn't talk. I couldn't even talk about it. My husband has been like checking up on me, like, how are you doing on the whole nursery thing? The nursery thing. Do you see what I'm saying? It's totally embarrassing, but at the same time, every problem boils down to what color are the napkins, and they boil down to these stupid, petty arguments. Even, should we buy this house or should we buy that house? Should we have 5 kids? Should we have 2 kids? If you're not looking any deeper, every argument just sounds stupid. Do you know what I mean? Some arguments are, well, there are 3 kinds of arguments that I kind of thought of. One is, well, they're not really arguments. Okay, if someone hurts you, if someone literally puts you in pain, then obviously you're going to resist that. So that's one type of story, and you don't need to go into theme a lot for that. You just, if somebody's trying to kill you, you're going to try to survive. Nobody needs a lot of background story on that. There's not a lot of motivation there. Everybody wants to live. Okay, and then another one is control. If they're going to control you and your body, freedom's pretty, so if you don't want to be controlled, then you're going to fight that. And
a really strong YA theme. It seems like it comes out.
Right.
That's why dystopian and YA are like this.
That's why they're like this.
Because they're all fighting the man.
Right.
It's about getting free of their parents.
Right. But every other argument sort of hinges on identity, really. And so I felt like, because I had been in nursery for a while, so I felt like my way of doing things was being critiqued. And I felt critiqued as a caretaker. I felt my spirituality was in question. I felt like I felt like I was embarrassed. I was like, are people going to want to have their kids over at my house anymore? Like, it was awful.
Ugh.
It was awful. I'm like shaking even thinking about it. Do you know what I mean? And if you looked at it from the surface, you'd be like, these women are terrible. Like, I hope I'm not friends with them, is what you would be thinking, because they're arguing over this stupid thing that nobody cares about. I don't even care. I don't even want to be in nursery, but they better not release me now. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I have dug in. I have an announced strategy. Do you see what I'm saying? And I need to, like, let go. But, and I'm trying. I really am. But my point is that when somebody is digging in on an argument, unless in real life when we're watching that, I mean, we watch that all the time, and it's just the background of our lives. People are in conflict all the time, whether they're at war with each other, husband and wives fighting, kids fighting with each other, parents fighting with kids. It's really not that entertaining. Stories are stories because they allow us to slow down. They kind of freeze that conflict by having an outer conflict go on, and they freeze that inner conflict and analyze it. They analyze it from this perspective and that perspective, with this going on and that going on, this character and that character, age versus youth, you know, big versus small, all of these things. And they let you really see why people are so, why their nails are dug in so hard. You know what I mean? And obviously I'm going to have to find a way to solve my emotional need some other way.
Yes, and you need your B story to come on over and give you the missing piece.
That's you? Are you the B story?
I am.
So anyway, so going back now to the first chapter, you need to have on the page now, Inciting Incident, we talked about that a ton last time, so we're not going to talk about that, but you need to have on the page inner conflict. That can just be shown if you want. Outer conflict is usually spoken about, talked about. It's usually pretty well on the page. That's not a hard one. But theme, I wanted to go back to Hunger Games. She and Gail, they say the words, may the odds be ever in your favor, or whatever. So they actually state the theme as a hypothesis. If your theme is something that you don't think that people will get very well, then you want to state it in narration, in dialogue, if you can. Either have your character state it, but usually it's a side character.
A side character.
It's usually a side character who states something. It can be a question, but that's a lot more self-aware. So if they're asking questions, open-ended questions like, are the odds in our favor? Like that's so much more introspective, and that's a fine kind of story. But a lot of stories are going to start with them not being so keyed into their own emotional need. Right. Do you know what I mean? But they are you're going to stop the camera so that time is progressing, and you're going to get to a point where somebody states the theme. They state like basically a potential theme as a hypothesis statement. So he says, may the odds be ever in your favor, suggesting that the odds sometimes can be in your favor. And so that's the hypothesis theme. And we stop that. And we stop that moment. And we have the character react to that emotionally. What's her emotional reaction? Her emotional reaction is, I've got to beat the odds. I got to do everything for my sister so she can beat the odds. We got to do it. You know what I mean? She's all in. She's not actually trying to change anything. She's totally representing stasis. She is obeying the rules of her world, with no thought of changing the rules of her world. Okay, and so that's the hypothesis thing. And then down the road, at the end of the story, your potential theme, it can be proven or disproven. Either way is totally fine. It can be, really. So your hypothesis statement might be something like, he who has the gold wins. And then at the end, that would be kind of a lame one to keep. But you could, I mean, it'd be kind of a tragedy, but he who has the gold really does win. That would be kind of an interesting story, maybe. But anyway, so, and then we already talked about how the resolution to the inner conflict is the actual theme. So the actual theme of Hunger Games, in my opinion, is that the odds are never in your favor, and that the only way to ever have odds in your favor is to take down the entire capital, which doesn't happen in the first book.
And frankly, the other regime too.
Probably.
You know, really.
Right.
Because ultimately, when she shoots coin.
I have not seen the end. Thanks a
lot.
Have
you read the third book?
No, I have not. I have not read the third book.
Spoiler alert!
It's okay. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Sorry.
It's okay. I don't even know who that is, so hopefully I'll forget. Okay. So now we're going to go on to, I'm sorry, I'm doing all the talking, Heather. I'm okay. You can talk about beats if we have time.
I will talk about beats if we have time.
Oh, yeah, we should do that, though.
Well, you just finished saying You said we state the theme, and I actually thought you were going into beats because she said we state the theme and we have Gail state the theme, and then you said we have this internal reaction from Katniss about the theme. So I had the funniest experience a little while ago. I was in a critique session, and my friend gave us her stuff, and we all read it, and we said, it's flat, it's just not emotionally with me, I'm just not feeling it. And you know, Nikki said the exact same thing when she read my first chapter. She was like, yeah, your character feels sort of uniformly bratty, and I can't, like, I scratched the surface, there's more brattiness underneath, and I just don't. And I was like, she said, well, but why, what is she feeling? And I was like, well, what do you think she's feeling? Her mother is forcing her to have an abortion and told her she ruined her life. And Nikki's like, yeah, but your character didn't feel it. It's not on the page. And I was like, what kind of soulless monster are you?
I think my favorite expression is on the page. On the page. That's my favorite thing.
Right. It has to be on the page. And the way that you get the emotion onto the page is this awesome, simple thing. And shout out to Jancy Patterson for being the one who pointed beats out to me. Right. Because it was her book that she had given us this scene, and we all just said, make it emotionally satisfying, please. And she went home and, you know, pulled her hair out and did some research. But what she found out was about beats. And really what she said, and she distilled it right down, was anytime you say something in your book, you have a character say something or a stimulus that would surprise your main character or that surprises the reader, you have to walk the reader through the reaction. So Nikki says to me, well, we should totally act out a beat. So Nikki says to me, ah! Okay, Nikki just slapped me. That was horrible. So Nikki slapped me. I was not expecting that. So my first reaction is, ah! That's my visceral reaction. Okay, and now here's the deal. You do not have to have every reaction, but you must have them in the proper order because humans can only process in a certain order.
I will say this, every human has all 4 reactions.
Right.
However, you do not have to specifically state
you don't
all
have to delineate all 4. In fact, if you delineate all 4, the readers will want to kill you. Because when I first learned about beats, I like put all 4 after everything, and my friends were like, no. And then I grabbed the desk, and then I took a gasp. And then, okay, so Nikki slapped me. All right, I said, ah, that was my visceral reaction. Right. My next moment, if I'm your protagonist, is to internally analyze what the crap is wrong with Nikki. And so then I'll think about that. But then you realize how brilliant we have thought, right? We have thoughts, and we think about that, and then we say, you know, that's my action.
Whatever your action was, just totally take it. It totally shows your personality.
Power. So my next thing is to say, Nikki, if you ever hit me again, I'm not doing the next webinar.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna
so,
believe that.
So basically we're talking, you've got your visceral reaction, then you've got your concrete thoughts, you've got the thought and processing going on, and then the third thing you have is action, which can be in the form of speech or actual physical action. I can lead the conversation. Right. I can make Nikki talk it through for an hour, whatever we've got to do. Or the other thing is this. Let's say I say something that shocks Nikki. I'm the protagonist. Clearly, I'm the main character here, so I'm the viewpoint character. Right. So I say something, Nikki is shocked. I watch her visceral reaction. That's Nikki's visceral reaction, so I describe her visceral reaction. I do not say, Nikki was shocked. Yeah. I say, Nikki threw her hand up and gasped, right? Then if I want really bad. I hope mine's no. So then if I want to, right after that, then I would say, so she did this, which I think means this. Now, I don't have to state it all that explicitly, but you could. I can if I want to, and your critique partners will tell you when it's too much. Right. So then I can say that, and then my next thing is to show her having a reaction. Right. Now, then if she does speak to me, I can analyze what I think her thought process was. I can do any of those things. Right. So anyway, but my point is, anytime that your reader's just like, you know, I just didn't feel it, go look for the beats. Go find the spot where your character was put on the spot, where they were surprised, where the reader was surprised, and then just walk the reader through it. Give us just a moment. Give us a visceral reaction. Give us a second to process that emotion, and also not to think that your main character is a robot.
Right. And I will talk a lot about pacing now. Pacing is when you go in a fast pace, you're going to try to get through as many of those reactions and as quickly
in a couple of words.
Just gasping, he stood up from his chair and yelled or whatever. Right. Like, so we've got, we just do it as fast as you can.
And Nikki is the one who pointed out to me that sometimes your visceral reaction is a word. Sometimes
Like,
you're
ouch, or
very
whatever,
frequently,
you know.
ugh, or wow,
Right,
you know,
right.
very frequently that's my visceral reaction is, oh, you know, just this kind of reaction response, verbal
right,
responses
right.
is acceptable.
Right, and then in fact, I like dialogue a lot to express, you know, like instead of having her say, oh, she was shaking, she was trying so hard to get this done, I'll have her say, oh, where is it? I can't, oh, geez, da 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 da, you know, like have her actually state all these, I don't know,
The
words
visceral reaction
that,
can be
a
this
lot of
incoherent something.
Right. A lot of ellipses, a lot of whatever. So we can see where they're going with it. But then also going back to pacing, when you want to highlight your hypothesis theme, you are going to want to slow the pacing down.
That's how we hang the lantern
all the beats. Give me all the beats. Spend half of a paragraph describing the visceral reaction. You know, as soon as she says, may the odds be in her favor, you know, there's this huge moment of like, looking out at the lake and like wondering, maybe they should escape, maybe she should have said yes to Gale, maybe, you know, just wondering about the odds and what are the odds and is it possible and whatever. And she doesn't ever say, I'm not sure how I feel about these odds. She never says that.
Right. But
you give us a sense that she's worried about it or it's somewhere in her subconscious by letting her spend the time on it. So spend the time on it as an author.
Right.
Okay, sure, we're really running out of time. I really love this little handout that I made. I don't know if you have it in front of you. There's a link to it on my blog. But we talked last time, James, about the Titanic versus the iceberg. And you asked if somebody could be on the iceberg. And that really got me thinking. And I really liked what I thought. I made a chart for you.
Pause for just one moment on the visceral reaction thing,
yes.
because we do have that question. My understanding of visceral reaction is different. So what I'm talking about is the visceral reaction is like the reflex. Essentially, it's your reflex. I smack her, she goes, you know, the gasp.
If my husband is having an affair, the first thing I'm going to feel is like, you know, the pit in the stomach or the rage, like does my hand go up to just hit him? And a lot of times that visceral reaction tells us a lot about the character too.
Yes. It's what they're going, it's how they react before they have the chance to consciously think and make a choice.
Right. That's
really what we're talking about. We're talking about
it's
instant reaction, right? Instant reaction that just almost happens to you.
It happens.
Then you can process. Then you make a choice.
That's right.
To either speak.
And you would think that it would be the same for everyone, but it's not, because one person finds out that their husband is having an affair and they immediately react to contempt, hatred,
right?
And another person finds that out and they immediately react to vulnerability. What did I do? I'll never be happy again. Right, kind of thing.
Nikki and I have wildly different visceral reactions from each other, which causes a whole lot of talking and analysis sometimes because we don't get it. But anyway, those POV, and when Sarah said that their minds are blown by the POV beats, I am going to send you to the best ever article that addresses both beats and scene and sequel, and together, those things just changed my life.
Yeah, we'll put it on the blog. And we'll put it on both. Yeah, so that you're not always just going to mine. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time going over these, and these are mostly types of stories, but I think it's important to think about what type of story you're offering to the reader in the first chapter. For example, look at the first, I don't know, square here. On the one side, it says change is sought. So this is a main character who is seeking change. And up at the top, it says MC is on the Titanic, pointed at an iceberg or another Titanic. So that would be a goal story. Any classic mystery, the change that is sought is to solve the mystery. The person who is doing the changing is the detective. It's pretty straightforward. Hunger Games,
fix the problem,
right?
Take down the system,
right? Hunger Games later. The whole arc of Hunger Games is that. But Katniss's arc is way down here in this corner. Katniss's personal arc is the changes to be avoided. She is not seeking change at all. And the iceberg, she's the iceberg. She's just sitting there in her world hoping nothing happens to her. And then the Titanic coming is when they call her sister's name. The whole society's Titanic or gunpoint or whatever is focused on her. And so she can't avoid change anymore. Okay, so I like, that one's kind of fun, but it's different. Titanic is the same way. The Titanic is the Titanic moment, right? Titanic, ice, Titanic, ice. I mean, it's pretty clear, but the main character, actually, Rose, she's in this category right here, where she is actually seeking change. She is sick of her mom's stiff world and all of their rules, and she's looking for a adventure, basically, or a different way to live, okay? And so she stumbles on this guy, and they start to have this romance, and she's looking for something to happen. Adventure stories start like that. Think of Star Wars. Luke is totally bored. As soon as he realizes there's a princess out there, he's like, dude, let's save her. Like, it's not the emotional need of like, wow, something horrible is happening. It's the emotional need of, I need more adventure in my life. I'm gonna go seek it.
Right, we've already told us that that's what we want.
Right, so he's on the iceberg, and he's hoping that the boat comes and hits him. He's like, over here, pick me. Like, I'm so bored over here. Home Alone, big Harry Potter, lots of middle grade in here. Because I think middle grade doesn't have a lot of control over their life. There's also a lot of romance over here. I had a question about Twilight. Twilight is in the same category as a lot of adventure stories, and there are werewolves and vampires.
There are vampires in Twilight.
And I think some people...
Let the record show.
I think some people might have been expecting an adventure story there. Okay, she stays in stasis for a long time, and I wrote that on here. No, romances can stay on the iceberg in a state of longing. See, people who like romances, they like longing. So she just stays there longing for something that she can't put her finger on. And there's this good-looking guy, and she's longing. And she can't put her finger on it. And there's this good-looking guy, and it goes on for like 100 pages. And people who are like waiting for an adventure to start, they are like, what is going on?
Those people are Nikki.
Me. But people who are like, I love romance, they're like rubbing their face in it, like, oh, the longing.
I'm still laying in the meadow. I'm still looking at sparkling pipes.
I don't even want to meet him or kiss him. I just want to long for him. You know, that's a straight up romance. Sleepless in Seattle. Okay, there are lots of places that end up being here. So, okay, and then I'll just go over my last little block here. You can have the Titanic coming toward an iceberg, and the Titanic is the main character, but they still don't want to have change. I know that's kind of weird, but think about it this way. If you guys have read Anne of Green Gables or Little Women, stasis is what's desired. Those worlds are pristine. Why would you want it to be ruined? Yeah, Anne doesn't want to change anything about Green Gables. Every chapter is like, oh, something might change about Green Gables. We need to fix it. And that's what it is. Every chapter, you know, Little Women, it's like even May getting engaged was like,
Gilbert's wife, get away from me. You're trying to ruin my Green Gables experience.
What is going to happen if there's change? This is terrible, you know? And that's the kind of story that it is. And so if that's the kind of story, that they're very episodic. Those kinds of stories feel, there's the time when the change almost happened from this. And there's the time when change almost happened from that. And then there's like a little bit of a bigger moment, and that's the climax. But then we all end happy because it's Little Women.
It stays the same.
Yes. You know, and it doesn't stay the same necessarily, but they realize that the new is still the old and that it's okay. All right. And so then another way to think of that is two Titanics. So both parties are moving. And I thought Indiana Jones and Romancing the Stone, I don't know if you've seen that one, but Indiana Jones for me is like, he can see the Nazis are going after some artifact. So that's a Titanic moving in a certain direction. And he's not avoiding them. He says, fine, I'm going to find it first. But he's really fighting for stasis, and that's why he destroys the Ark at the end. He's not really fighting. He's not bringing on like a new era of Ark of the Covenant-ness.
No.
Do you see what I'm saying? He's fighting for stasis. But he's actively fighting for it. So that's why he's on a ship, because he's moving. He's got direction. Katniss is a strong character, but she's only moved in direction. Like, if at any point the world said to her, look, you don't really need to do this, she wouldn't do it. Do you see what I'm saying? She wouldn't keep fighting for it. So in that sense, she's more like the iceberg, in my opinion. Okay, and if you've never seen Romancing the Stone, go watch it because it's awesome. We talked about beats. Oh, Titanic.
You just like Romancing the Stone because you can say Cartagena.
Cartagena. I wanted to go to Cartagena when I was a kid. I told you I was like my dream destination is to go to Cartagena. It's like this total unsafe drug area. But anyway. Is the movie Titanic? You've seen Titanic?
Yes.
Is it a tragedy or not?
That is a great question.
What do you think?
It has been 12 years since I saw that movie.
It's all right. It's all right.
I would say yes, but you're probably getting at no.
Well, I would say it's a split. She doesn't get her purpose, which if you assume is to live happily ever after with the guy, the dudes, right? Because her stated goal.
But she doesn't also have to go marry yucky pants, and and she doesn't have to. She gets to be free after.
Exactly.
Which is what she wants.
Yeah, with her motivation.
So it's a wistful ending.
Exactly. Her motivation was to be free of her mom's fearsome control.
Right.
And at the end, she gets that.
Right.
And she doesn't get it through her stated goal, which was to have this romance with this guy.
That would be lifelong.
That would be lifelong and be epic and whatever. She didn't get that. So in that sense, it's not a classic romance. The setup is very classic romance. And if he lived, it would be a romance. But he did not
If
live.
later he just came swimming up.
I'm really cold, but I'm here. It's okay.
I won't let go. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, fine. That's my very favorite part is when she says, "I'll never let go," and then like smashes his frozen fingers off so he can like fall down into the.
I don't remember that.
Anyway.
Okay, so Katniss is on the iceberg. Luke is on the iceberg. Do an iceberg thing. It would be awesome. Yes. Okay, we did everything.
Giveaway. Giveaway.
Now we do the giveaway. Okay, yes. Karen Brown, are you out there? If you are out there, speak now, or I have 2 other people who could win. And
Because there's 2 winners today, right? Don't we have 2 winners today? Because I'm doing a critique.
We do. Rachel, you won. Rachel Larson.
Is Rachel Larson out there?
I don't know. Let's see.
Man.
Is there anything else we wanted to? Oh yeah, crocodile skin shoes, totally. And I love it when he says, "Oh man, the Doobie Brothers broke up." Because I was like, I love the Doobie Brothers too.
Yeah,
I
I
wish
don't
they had.
love them.
What?
Sorry. I don't love them. Anyway.
I can't be my friend anymore.
Okay.
Anyone? Karen Brown, Rachel
Karen's
Larson.
not there.
Come on. Should I just email them?
Do you know what we could, or what we could do since we said they have to be here,
I know.
is we could scroll through our commenters.
Well, that's true. Did everyone comment who's here though?
Everyone comment now if you're here.
Comment now. There are 11 people watching. I don't know if we have.
Can we see who they are? Anyway.
I don't know if we can. Go do something important with
just
your
thought I
life.
would mention really quickly, I do have, for the mechanics of desire with like the concrete goal and the emotional desire and the stated, the strategy, I have a great worksheet that I've worked up from my time with Martine Levitt that I would love to pass on to anybody who sends me an email. So I will pass that along. And
oh, interesting. He's saying I need to go watch Indiana Jones again. He wanted to examine and study the Ark. It's the U.S. government that hides it in a warehouse. I will go and watch it again, and I won't argue with you, Cody. You obviously know more about me than Indiana Jones. But I will say that he wasn't necessarily going after the Ark with the intent to change the world. It's not like he was thinking, I'm going to herald in this new era. So in that sense, to me, he wasn't really going for change. He was more going for, in that sense, I guess it's an adventure for him. Because I almost put that one in the adventure category. So I'll agree to disagree with you on that. Sorry that Carol's here. Heather's here.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, our numbers. We did a random number generator. So go to the number of commenters. That's what we'll do.
Go on the number.
For today, we'll go down. Okay, so what was our number?
How many commenters do we have? Okay, comment now or forever hold your peace.
Okay, so our numbers. What was our first number that we picked?
Oh, it's 13. We don't have that many though. So
grief.
Go to the next one.
Next
7.
One. 7. So
6.
Oh, Carol. Autumn. James. Tiffany.
Just tell me who's 6 and 7.
Okay, Tiffany's number 6.
Woohoo!
Tiffany.
You get it. Woo! Woo! You'll be critiqued by Heather. How about we'll do that?
Okay, and then the next one is gonna be who?
Why don't we go?
Let's go from the bottom. We'll go from the bottom for our number 7.
Sorry, we'll put the camera 7.
5, 6, 7. It's Afton.
Afton,
you win.
Woohoo! Sorry guys, I'll have to come up with that.
Our system is amazing.
Oh, we're gonna do our final finale, our ending.
Oh yes.
Are you ready?
We want a good closing image.
We want a closing image so we don't look like idiots. Okay, ready?